Breaking news tonight, Cuff Daddy. Sean Combs arrested by the feds in a Lux hotel in the dark of night, now in federal custody. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. Thank you for being with us.
Today I'm announcing the unsealing of a 3-count indictment, charging Sean Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, interstate transportation for prostitution. The indictment alleges that between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice.
And we have just gotten our hands on the federal indictment. But first, let's talk about what went down in the dark of night. Sean Puffy Combs seen out on the street in New York just 30 minutes before feds break into his luxury suite at the Park Hyatt Hotel on 57th Street and arrest Combs and proceed to shred that hotel room, looking for evidence. Joining me right now at the hotel just outside the Park Hyatt is crimeonline.com investigative reporter Angelica Martinez. Angelica, thank you for being with us. Tell me what happened right there last night.
Yes, Nancy, we are currently outside the Hyatt Hotel, the Park Hyatt Hotel, where Sean Puffy Combs was arrested last night. He was arrested following an indictment that was returned by a grand jury yesterday on Monday, and that set in the process to arrest Sean Combs.
Guys, joining us, Angelica Martinez at the Park Hyatt. We understand that feds, pursuant to warrant, went into Combs' room right behind you up on one of the penthouse levels and arrested Combs last night. He had no idea it was about to happen. We've also heard reports the arrest was to go down at least 48, if not 72 hours later, but something triggered the feds to make the arrest last night. Combs actually spotted out on the street and videoed BSing with fans and friends just before, literally minutes before the feds arrested him. I know they were poised outside the Park Hyatt Hotel where you're standing right now, Angelica, waiting for him to come back in with eyes on Sean Puffy Combs the entire evening, Angelica.
Yes, so apparently negotiations for Sean Combs' surrender had been in the talks for a while. And like you said, Nancy, something triggered this arrest. Something happened that caused them to move it from allegedly later in this week to just last night. He was allegedly arrested right in the lobby, and he was not expecting that, according to some sources.
Angelica, I think I know what may have prompted the early arrest. You know, you're about 20, 30 minutes from Teterboro private airstrip. Combs has money. You can get on a private plane without a passport. Now, where you can land without one is a whole nother can of worms. But if they got wind that he was leaving with all of his money and access to private planes, that's the time you make the arrest ahead of time. Joining me there at the Park Hyatt Hotel in the heart of Manhattan, Angelica Martinez. Let's open it up to the panel. And the last few moments, we caught the lawyer, the defense attorney, Agnefello, and he states his client is going to be released. Do you really believe that Sean Puffy Combs is going to get out on bond? Straight out to high-profile lawyer Nima Rahmani, former federal prosecutor, president, West Coast Trial Lawyers, and author of Harvard to Hashtag. He is an expert in federal law. Nima, thank you for being with us. Quick question regarding bond. Now, we know that Combs was held overnight, and he is with the feds right now. You know his lawyer is going to make a big play for him to get out on bond and make a big show, probably walking along Park Avenue, maybe Fifth Avenue, wearing his fur coat as if he has a worry in the world. Why do I say that? Because when you don't know a horse, Nima, look at his track record. That has been his MO since the get-go. Hey, you raided my house? No problem. I'm out surfing, water sports with my family, living it up with some champagne. Yeah, that's him. That's his MO, to act like nothing is wrong and give the illusion of complete innocence and carefree. Do you think they're going to give him bond?
Nancy, it's really up to the judge. I don't think he deserves bond because we're talking about some very serious charges, right? And bond is appropriate when an individual is not a risk at flight or a danger to the community. And like you said, he's both. We're talking about someone that's engaged in violence, drug offenses, sex offenses, firearms allegations there. This is someone who's violent. And of course, he has essentially unlimited means and can take off. Now, there's going to be a detention hearing, usually within 3 court days of the first appearance. And a judge is going to have to decide whether there's no condition or combination of conditions that can guarantee Diddy's appearance in court. I think, even though I disagree, if you put a gun to my head, I think he is going to be granted some sort of bond, even though I don't think he deserves it.
Put him up. Nima Romani, if it were anybody but Sean Puffy Combs, they would not get bond, because this is a huge federal indictment. You're a Fed. I was a Fed. You know how long it's taken them to put this thing together? All it takes is one private flight to another country. He's gone. I mean, look, we've never been able to get Roman Polanski back, and many, many others. We see artists, think of Kanye, for Pete's sake, who records in Paris. He doesn't need to be in the U.S. This indictment shows a vast criminal enterprise. What are we learning? We're learning that there are co-conspirators. But I want to tell you, Nima and the rest of the panel, listen to this. In the very beginning, in the very first line, for decades, the defendant abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill sex desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. And that is exactly what he's been doing. Straight back out on the street, joining us in front of the Park Hyatt Hotel, crimeonline.com investigative reporter Angelica Martinez. Angelica, as late as last night, 30 minutes before he is arrested by the feds, he's out like he doesn't have a care in the world, BSing, playing around on the streets with his cohorts. So that's his MO. He always has the facade, the veneer of successful rap mogul, billionaire, out on yachts, living it up, dripping in furs and diamonds. But that's the way he portrays himself. And right here in the federal indictment, we see that's part of his modus operandi. Forcing others to fulfill his sex desires, in other words, raping them, while protecting his reputation and concealing his conduct. Angelica?
Yeah, so P. Diddy definitely has a history of this. If we look back to when his LA and Miami homes were raided back in March, P. Diddy was out living his life in Miami with not a care in the world, taking pictures with fans and, posing for Instagram lives. And so that's definitely part of the persona he has tried to keep up and has done so successfully for these past couple of decades. P. Diddy was the guy you wanted to be around, you wanted to have parties with, get invited to his, luxurious, amazing white parties, as we heard from the latest lawsuit from Adria English, who was one of those participants in the white parties. So, he spent the night in federal custody, which is quite the contrast from this very luxurious Hyatt hotel we have behind me. And, as you said, in the heart of Manhattan. So, yeah, very, very interesting stuff going down with P. Diddy.
The indictment is naming cohorts, but who will they end up being? It gives veiled references to security guards, 7 other businesses, employees that worked for Combs and enabled him to basically run a sex trafficking enterprise. What does that mean? RICO, racketeering. It was first reserved for the mob. The mob. This is what it means. Let me break it down. Jump in with me, Nima Romani. First, you have a predicate act. That can be It can be a murder of Tupac Shakur. It can be any number of state crimes. But that predicate act is like the center of a big spider web. And there are other people helping you enlist sex victims, to enlist and further your criminal enterprise. That is how the feds are going to bring in other witnesses as defendants. And in the end, Romani, they are going to rat out Combs. Agree, disagree?
Oh, agree, because when you're dealing with a RICO conspiracy, anyone who participates in the conspiracy, they're on the hook for all the substantive acts in furtherance of the conspiracy. So what does that mean? Someone called or helped to get one of these commercial sex workers and they're by force, they're on the hook even if they didn't participate in the rape. So the feds have a lot of leverage in these RICO cases. And like you said, you don't need a whole lot to prove RICO. You don't need a mob or the cartel or street gangs. You need a criminal enterprise. Yeah.
Romani, we just got our hands on this very lengthy federal indictment, and you know the feds go whole hog. They're not going to charge you with 1 or 2 counts. I'd like to direct your attention to paragraph 12A. Combs and other members and associates of Combs Enterprise, there's your witnesses right there, wielded power and prestige and would have repeat freak offs. Freak offs. The feds, their words, not mine. They were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs himself arranged, directed during, and often electronically recorded. A freak off. In arranging them, Combs, listen, here's the witnesses, with the assistants and members and associates of Combs Enterprise, here's the crime: transported, caused to be transported, sex workers across state lines and internationally. They occurred regularly, sometimes lasted multiple days, involved multiple commercial sex workers. And during the freak-offs, that's just a nice word. That's just a nice phrase for forcing women to be videoed while they're being raped. During the freak-offs, Combs distributed drugs to victims to keep them obedient and compliant. Sometimes, unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept videos he filmed of victims in sex acts with sex workers. Did you hear that? That's exactly, Nima Romani, what Cassie Ventura said in her lawsuit, that he would force her to complete sex acts with sex workers and he would video it. After freak-offs, Combs and victims got IV fluids to recover from all the drug use and physical exertion. Can you hear what I'm saying, Romani?
I
Can
do,
you
Nancy.
hear
This is
about
all
the freak
consistent.
offs?
I do. This is all consistent with what Cassie told us almost a year ago in November. She was forced to have sex with these sex workers. Diddy recorded it. So there's going to be a treasure trove of evidence. And if you look at that indictment, they recovered 1,000 bottles of baby oil, Nancy. 1,000 that were used in these sex acts. So these are women who were brought, and sometimes
him
men,
up,
and they were
please.
forced to commit sex.
Nima Romani, you know what? Didn't you go to Harvard?
I did.
Your instructor at Harvard, did you ever imagine that you would be right here, right now, with me, talking about a billionaire's how many bottles of baby oil did he have for his freak-offs? How many?
More than 1,000, Nancy. I never thought when I graduated Harvard Law School at age 22, I would be talking about Diddy rolling around in baby oil with commercial sex workers. So the answer to that is no.
Me either. But this is just a tiny taste of what we're getting right here. And I'll tell you what I think, Romani, and the feds are not going to like it. But they were facing the prospect of being a toothless tiger, a house cat. They had Cassie Ventura and a video leaked of him beating her, kicking her, dragging her up and down the halls of a hotel on video. A grown man out in the hall wearing nothing but a towel, beating her viciously and dragging her back to his hotel room to do what? Her. That's my allegation. And they were doing nothing. There was a string of people saying, he raped me. He made me have sex with sex workers. He videoed it. There's the Tupac Shakur cloud, murder hanging over him. So what were the feds going to do? Sit back and twiddle their thumbs? No, they had to act, Romani.
Well, of course they had to act. We've all seen that video of Diddy beating Cassie in 2016. And, when you're talking about RICO, there's a 10-year window for those predicate acts. So that window is coming up.
2016, Romani. 2016, nearly 10 years ago. They had to act or else hang their head in shame, Nima.
They did. And their window was closing. Nancy, if they didn't file this, and we were asking, why did it take 6 months? If they didn't file, all of a sudden, some of these counts, they can fall off because of the statute of limitations. So the feds had to finally act. There was a lot of pressure on them. Victim after victim was coming forward. We were talking about the 8 or 9 different lawsuits on this show. So the question I have is, why did it take so long? Better late than never. But justice delayed is justice denied. So I'm glad the victims are going to finally have their day in criminal court. Although this, of course, will put all those civil lawsuits on hold.
As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them.
Sean Puffy Combs, in custody, in federal custody, after being arrested last night at the Park Hyatt Luxury Hotel, 57th Street, Manhattan. Now, the feds seemingly had planned to take Combs into custody at a later date, but something triggered them to act last night, and then they totally shredded his hotel room looking for evidence. Joining me an all-star panel, but we caught up with his lawyer, Agnefello, and this is what he has to say.
He came to New York to basically engage the court system and start the case, and it'll start today. And he's going to plead not guilty, obviously. He's going to fight this with all of his energy and all of his might and the full confidence of his lawyers. And I expect a long battle with a good result for Mr. Combs.
Do you think he'll be released?
I'm going to fight like hell to get him released, and he should be released with all that he's done and coming here voluntarily. And guys, I'm going to cut it short because I have to go in. All right?
He should be released because of all he's done. He should stay behind bars because all he has done. I'm guaranteeing you, if this were not a wealthy billionaire and famous person, there would be no chance in HELL that he would be released on bond. I mean, Lynn Shaw is joining me, founder, executive director, Lynn's Warriors, committed to ending sex trafficking. Lynn Shaw, it's easy to get sucked in, not me, but for many people to get sucked into Sean Combs' lifestyle, his Rolls Royces, his mansions, his diamond rings, his fur coats, his luxurious lifestyle. You know what? The devil can wear a tuxedo and fit right in at the symphony. That's what I'm saying. But until you've seen what happens to sex trafficking victims, it changes everything. It changes the way you look at abusers, allegedly, like Sean Combs. Explain what these women go through.
First of all, I am disgusted and very angry, Nancy. You know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but in New York City, if you have a nickname, a street name, which he did, and it was Pimp Daddy. Let me repeat that, Pimp Daddy. I am angry because the focus now, of course, is all on him. They should lock him up and throw away the keys to show all the victims and survivors of sex trafficking that this is happening, that this thug is being held accountable. Because if they let him out, we will not. We still have, think about all the women who have not come forward. How about all the girls that were teenagers? Nobody's talking about that yet, that are afraid to come forward. Now, women, I want to remind you, I started out of college in the music business. I have always heard from girls and women about this whole criminal cartel going up through the hip hop, then becoming rap, and Pimp Daddy. That is what they called him 10 years ago. What has taken so long? So I want to remind everybody, although this is all going on and it is a great day here in New York City, we must focus on our survivors. I want them to get equal attention. I want them to have voices because lives have been ruined. Healthcare, their bodies have been ruined. Their minds have been ruined, and they feel like they have nobody to turn to. There aren't the resources. So if we show Pimp Daddy by example is going to be locked up, you're going to see a lot more women come forward, talk about this. And as I'm sitting here, I'm getting texts from people. We told you, we told you, we told you, that have been affiliated with him or the music business over the years. So I say, let us use this as an example. Let's get through this, lock them up, and then talk about what we can do to support survivors.
Nima Rahmani, she's right.
Yes.
But how are we going to do it? Taking a look at the indictment, give me your breakdown on the charges, Nima Rahmani.
Well, we have three sets of charges. We have a RICO conspiracy. That's that racketeering, and it's the unlawful agreement to commit two or more predicate acts in furtherance of that conspiracy. So we got assault, we got drug trafficking, we got sex trafficking. We even have arson, Nancy, bribery, intimidation of witnesses. So a lot going on with that RICO charge. Then we have the two substantive counts. There's the sex trafficking across state lines. That's that federal hook. And sex between consenting adults isn't illegal, but if there's fraud, force, or coercion, it is. Then it becomes trafficking. So that's that allegation. And then we have prostitution across state lines. So money is paid. Again, that's that federal jurisdictional.
Hey, Nima,
those are the
talking
charges.
of money, when you refer to money
Lots of
being paid in furtherance of the criminal enterprise, in paragraph 4, it directly names the Cassie Ventura video. And it says a woman, but it says Combs dragged, kicked, and threw a vase at a woman as she was attempting to leave. And when a member of hotel security intervened and tried to stop him, he tried to bribe the staff member to ensure violence. To ensure silence. That goes hand in hand with what you're saying, Nima.
Well, it does, and we know that he paid tens of thousands of dollars for that video. What he didn't know is the hotel staff maintained a copy, and CNN got a hold of that video. So this is just part of the pattern. And even after the raids of his Miami and Los Angeles homes, there's phone calls reportedly where Diddy is trying to bribe and dissuade witnesses. So there's two ways he does it. Apparently, if you look at the allegations, he tries to pay them off, and we know a lot of them have filed civil lawsuits, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's trying to buy their silence. And the other is, of course, the force, right? You look at the indictment. He has 3 AR-15s with obliterated serial numbers, lots of guns, there's beatings, there's threats. So Diddy is going to do everything he can to prevent these witnesses and victims from testifying at trial.
Hey, Nima, it's really hard for anybody to beat a gun charge because all the state's got to show is it's an illegal weapon with the serial numbers scratched off, and it's in your possession. That's it. That is a federal gun charge. It's really hard to beat that. Hey guys, you're seeing this video this is after the raid on that mansion from our friends at TMZ. But Nima Rahmani, in here, we see in the indictment that we've just gotten, we managed to get it before it was read in court. The feds are so smart, Nima. Have you ever seen fisher people use not just a rod and reel, but a net? That's what they've got here, Nima. And if you could explain, as a former Fed, they talk about security staff, employees, staff, domestic people, all sorts of administrative employees that helped and enabled Combs. And what they're doing is they're throwing out a net. And by doing this, they can catch all of them as unnamed co-conspirators. Explain the significance of what they have very wisely done in this indictment.
So an indictment that alleges conspiracy requires an unlawful agreement between two or more people. But you don't have to charge the two or more people. They can be unindicted co-conspirators, which means that they're named or not, and they're not charged. But any good lawyer knows that they can be charged and they can be on the hook for all this. And talking about the freak offs, if you read the indictment, there's a lot of materials they need. They need bed sheets. They talked about the baby oil. They need the drugs. They need the IVs. They need the lighting. They need the cameras. So these individuals that were part of Diddy's circle, they provided all of this.
Please join us on our mission to find missing people, especially children, to solve unsolved homicides. If you're on the go, catch us on your favorite podcast app where you can get all of our content where we, in our own way, seek justice.
As the indictment alleges, in late 2023, after public allegations were made about Combs' crimes, he and others pressured witnesses and victims to stay silent, including by making phone calls to witnesses and victims and giving them a false narrative of what they had experienced.
Sean Puffy Combs in federal custody. He was arrested last night in the cover of darkness at the Park Hyatt Hotel, downtown Manhattan, 57th Street. The arrest was sooner than the feds had anticipated. Something triggered them to have the arrest go down immediately. And I can guarantee you, as Combs was filmed out on the street, BSing with his friends, cohorts, and fans, the feds had eyes on him until he went back in that hotel. How do I know that? Because if we saw a video of him and he was out on the street, 30 minutes later, the arrest goes down, all those feds were in place in case things went sideways. We know Sean Puffy Combs had multiple firearms, many of them illegal. And when you're making an arrest, you never know what's going to go wrong. I mean, Chris McDonough joining me, Director of Cold Case Foundation, former homicide detective, over 300 homicide investigations under his belt. You and I have been on many a raid and many an arrest. And when that happens, you don't know what idiot's going to grab a gun and start shooting, Chris.
Yeah, that's a very high risk situation, Nancy. And a scenario like this, where you have an individual who is basically what we would call an anger retaliatory predator, he is capable of anything. And so the feds were probably way on top of this with either what they call a T3 warrant, where they're sitting in a box somewhere and listening to all of the conversations going on, especially with something this high profile, or they had a criminal informant in the game, and somebody tipped off something that put this whole thing into motion.
You know, another issue, and what I'm saying about the feds being ready, locked and loaded, eyes on Diddy, I guarantee you they were watching him for hours and hours before they finally moved in and had agents in place in the fire stairwell, in undercover, in the lobby, for real, with the earphones in their ear, describing, here he comes, he's going on the elevator, he's coming up. Everything was synchronized and perfectly orchestrated to ensure, or try to ensure, that no one got hurt. Diddy, surprised, he did not think this was happening, and he is in federal custody right now. He just saw his lawyer, Agnefello, who vows to get him out on bond. Will that happen? Joining me an all-star panel, including Chris McDonough, Lynn Shaw, Angelica Martinez outside Park Hyatt. But I want to go now to Nima Rahmani, former Fed, now trial lawyer. Kelly Hyman joining us, trial lawyer out of Miami, host of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Once Upon a Crime in Hollywood. Kelly, thank you for being with us. I want to talk to you about the indictment. In paragraph 4, we see a direct reference to the Cassie Ventura video where he's dragging her and beating her and kicking her in that luxury hotel, throwing a vase at her. It goes on and on and on. But in paragraph 5, we see him being described as facilitating and using his business, Combs' business, to cover up his abuse and commercial sex. It goes on to discuss what I believe are going to be unnamed co-conspirators, or at the very least witnesses, security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and I'm reading from paragraph 10 right now, high-ranking supervisors and other close associates of Combs. That could be anybody. As Nima Rahmani and I were just talking, that could be the guy who set up the lighting for his freakouts. And what the freakouts are is Combs forcing women to engage in sex acts with paid sex workers on video. Basically, being raped on video by some sex worker that you have flown in. We also know that he would give the victims drugs. Sometimes they didn't even know they were drugged. And even, it's alleged, threatened them with guns. The whole time, Combs would be watching the freak-off and or. My legal point is that they've named all these people: security staff, household staff, personal assistants, supervisors, other associates of Sean Puffy Combs. That's a very wide net from which to catch other co-defendants and witnesses, Kelly.
These are serious allegations, Nancy. And it's also important to remember the fact that he is the only one listed in this indictment. So what does that mean? That potentially means the fact that the other people, whether it's people that work for him, are cooperating with the federal government, cooperating and giving information to let them know exactly what happened and what transpires as well. But it could also mean that their co-conspirators could potentially also be charged as well. So these are serious allegations. Now, what this means is the grand jury listened to evidence, and based on the evidence presented to the grand jury, they believe that there was some serious crimes, and now he is going to go to trial, and ultimately the jurors of his peers will make a determination whether or not to find him guilty of these charges.
We are not done. This investigation is ongoing, and I encourage anyone with information about this case to come forward and to do it quickly. Anyone with information can call 1-877-4HSI-TIP.
Joining me, Sydney Sumner, crimeonline.com investigative reporter. Sydney, this guy's got a rap sheet as long as I-75. Over and over, he was tied to, for instance, he was tied to a deadly stampede in Harlem. 91, accused of sex assault after a date. Arrested with Jennifer Lopez. Remember that? The shootout in a club. Accused of swinging a kettlebell at a UCLA coach. That was in 2015. Then, it goes, I don't have to even name it all. There's so much. Somehow, he has escaped hard jail time, Sydney Sumner. So what is he looking at now? Tell me what you know about the arrest last night and the charges now pending.
Well, Nancy, these are very serious charges. We have those 3 counts: that racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. These are not charges that will be taken lightly, and not to mention all of the other things mentioned in this indictment: narcotics offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. What's interesting to me, those kidnapping and arson claims, that kidnapping, we've seen that in several of these lawsuits, the latest by Don Richard, claiming that Diddy locked her in a car for hours and left her there. Her father had to travel from New Jersey to New York to get her out of that car. When confronted, Combs basically threatened her father, saying, "Do you want to ruin your daughter's music career?" And the arson, we learned about that in Cassie Ventura's lawsuit. She claimed that Diddy blew up Kid Cudi's car when she dated him for just a couple dates. So we have seen a lot of this, and we know that his staff is helping him accomplish all of these crimes. So I don't think the feds are going to let Diddy off easy this time.
Chris McDonald, let me direct you to page 7 of the indictment. Combs subjected victims to physical, emotional, verbal abuse. You know, we were talking with Nima about the baby oil. Well, now we know what all had been found during the search of that Miami mansion, his mansion that was then put up for sale. Monitoring devices, lighting, fresh sheets, drugs, extra linens, lubricants, the lighting for the freak-offs, the people who would pay to clean hotel rooms after the freak-offs, paying to mitigate room damage, arranging for travel for victims, for commercial sex workers. I mean, it goes on and on and on. That's what they were looking for at his mansion when they raided it. These freak-offs would occur often in hotel rooms, and that's why they're getting all that information. You know, we were wondering, opining the other day, why do they want all the names of the people that were in the hotel, visiting the hotel room of Sean Combs? Why do we want their room service orders? Why do we want to know who was working that day, what cars they used, what tag numbers they gave? Now we know why.
Yeah, I mean, all of that evidence, enabling this conspiracy of sex trafficking, et cetera. Nancy, early in my career from 84 to 86, I was a vice investigator, and I worked undercover with the most vulnerable personalities, that were out on the street. This guy, the doc said it earlier, let's just call it what it is. He was a pimp. He is a pimp. And this is all he has known. But the problem now that we have, those victims, the girls that have come forward and will potentially testify against him, I think you would agree, those girls' lives are in jeopardy. Starting today, big time. That has ramped up. And so I am really concerned about the safety of these women going forward. Yep.
Hey, Lynn Shaw and Karen Stark. First to you, Lynn Shaw. If you look at page 8, we see in paragraph E, as an elephant, where Sean Combs' associates would observe, stand by and watch him beat and physically injure victims, keeping them from leaving locations, as Sydney Summers told us about keeping one victim locked in a car, putting them up in hidden locations, forcing them to remain in hiding days at a time to recover from the injuries Sean Combs inflicted on their bodies. So they would stand by and watch the victims get. The first trafficking case I ever had, the victim was 13 years old. Combs has been accused of underage. They would stand by and video these women getting beaten. And in paragraph A, page 6, often unbeknownst to the victims, they were being videoed while he forced them to have sex with commercial sex workers. But then that wasn't enough. According to this, he would beat them, and they would actually have to go in hiding for days on end to recover so the world wouldn't know what Combs did.
Two of the biggest things that make money right now, Nancy, are sex trafficking and extortion. I have spoken to different women over the years, and I would say, come forward with this case in New York. And they would say, no, I am too scared. I'm in fear for my life. I'm in fear for my family's lives. And I just want to forget about it. And that is common with sex trafficking victims and survivors. My biggest fear here, though, is I want to say, I'm afraid I don't want this to turn into what I believe happened with the Jeffrey Epstein case, where there was a lot of noise, a lot of this, a lot of that. And then we never, in my opinion, really got to the bottom of that. Really, we have one person in prison, Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman. What else happened? And then a lot of those victims signed on with lawyers for class action lawsuits, and we hear nothing from them.
Yeah.
This is my greatest fear, that this will just all disappear. We cannot let this pimp daddy get away with this. Mr. Owning New York City, Mr. parading around yesterday with Bergdorf Goodman shopping bags and lounging on the Great Lawn in Central Park all day Sunday afternoon. This is incredible. He must, I repeat, he must be put in jail, and we must throw away the keys and make him an example. We don't tolerate this.
It's been a long time coming. Sean Puffy Combs in federal custody. His lawyer fighting tooth and nail to get him out on bond. We have the federal indictment, pages and pages and pages of allegations, straight out to Kelly Hyman joining us, veteran trial lawyer. Kelly, if you look at this, the feds did it up right because they name all of these charges. They implicate unnamed co-conspirators, which may turn out to be witnesses against him, but they throw in racketeering. I want to explain that because it sounds very confusing. RICO, racketeering. It's called a criminal enterprise. It's normally reserved for the mob, where you'd have a godfather ruling over hundreds of thugs, okay? Getting them to do his will, carrying out murders, pimping, theft, drugs, you name it. They were all acting in concert. That's what they have alleged here. Why is that important? Because it's easy to convict somebody on racketeering, as it's easy to convict somebody on a gun charge. Jump in.
The evidence is going to be key. So when you look at racketeering cases, you're looking at allegations of a conspiracy, some type of plan, some type of way that they came together. And based on the allegations, they're alleging that there was in fact this conspiracy, and the only person that it benefited was Sean Combs, was P. Diddy. He's the only one that benefited from this. And they conspired together. There's allegations that if someone was going to say something, that there was allegations of threat or harm to them. So they were all working together. They were all conspiring. And that was the criminal, in fact, enterprise to harm these women. As someone who represents women that have been in human traffic and sex trafficking, the allegations in this case are very severe.
And this is going to really hurt him. And the forfeiture allegation paragraph on page 12, it's 18, is talking about forfeiture allegations. I'm talking about going after Diddy's money. You know what? To hey with the money. What about these victims? Many people think, oh, they did it for the money. They did it for the career. They were on video, drugged and beaten, kicked, forced to hide out until their bruises went away. There is no defense to that, according to the allegations. We wait and watch as justice unfolds. If Sean Combs manages to walk out on bond, yes, he'll be released. For now. Let's stop and remember American hero, investigator Maisha Brianna Stewart, Greenville PD. Just 30, Stewart shot and killed in the line of duty, survived by her little 3-year-old boy and her parents. American hero, investigator Maisha Brianna Stewart. Thank you to all of our guests being with us as we watch justice unfold in a federal courtroom. But thank you especially to you for being with us. Nancy Grace, signing off. I'll see you tomorrow night, 6 and 9 o'clock sharp Eastern. And until then, good night, friend. Please join us on our mission to find missing people, especially children, to solve unsolved homicides. If you're on the go, catch us on your favorite podcast app, where you can get all of our content, where we, in our own way, seek justice.